So I'm going to give you a slight introduction. Then I'm going to show some slides with different, obviously show and tell type of items. And then we can have questions at the end. If you have something important while we're doing something, you can do it. And I can always go back and refer back to a specific slide if you want to. So I started collecting Bermuda back in 1983. So it's been a while. And when I did, I got into all kinds of things, started with stamps and eventually got into all the postal history. Postal history piqued my interest when I went to a stamp show that they used to have many years ago in Miami Beach. They used to have over 100 dealers. And they had two picture postcards from World War One that were censored. And I thought that was interesting. And that kind of started the whole postal history thing. And so I've collected pretty much every aspect of Bermuda stamp and postal history that there is at one time or another. And many years ago, I wasn't doing much with the tercentenaries. And, I didn't see much out there. There wasn't anything that I saw in dealer boxes, whatever, that piqued my interest greatly. So I sold off pretty much the few things that I had back probably 25, 30 years ago. Well, more recently, some people that have unfortunately passed away, members of our group, other opportunities that came up, mainly in England. I started picking up items here and there, and I said, you know what? Let me revisit this. This really is an era that has some opportunities to find some really interesting postal history. So now I'm going to introduce my first slide. I'll read pretty much a little bit. I won't read it, but I'll tell you about it. So the tercentenary stamps, obviously Bermuda celebrated the tercentenary 300 years from 1620 to 1920. They issued two sets of stamps for that commemoration. The first issues were issued on November 11th, 1920, and then the other issues variously at different times between then and May 12th of 1921. Now, what makes this issue difficult in terms of collecting, sorry, I moved it, is that first of all, at that time you had the caravels and the high values, the key plates, and the caravels were the ones used primarily on a lot of mail. And so you had these big old stamps that had, you'd have to lick and put on an envelope, going back to the old days. And people weren't too excited about that. Secondly, this is right after World War One. And even though the tourist business started picking up, it wasn't quite the same it was either pre-war or up until the later 1920s when it really picked up again, and you had multiple cruise ships visiting all the time. So there was a little bit of a slow return to that. And so basically not too many people use these stamps. And when they did, most of the time it was just pure regular mail. So a lot of 1D and 2.5D values going to Canada, UK, and England, and Canada and the US primarily. Or you had a lot of people that were collectors, and then they overfranked and created all kinds of interesting covers that were philatelic. So there is a innate challenge. I also made a point on here to say that there was also no flights. So the only flights that occurred in the 1920s at this time were the Zeppelin flights from 1925. And obviously that was after these stamps were officially issued. And these stamps were basically removed and destroyed. You can see the date there, August 26, 1925. So there's a very short window of time where these stamps were actually available at the post office under regular circumstances. During that time, these elements that I'm telling you also were going on. So not a lot of potential usages here. And so it's a challenge. And it's a difficult one and an interesting one. I was just reminiscing that in all the years that I've been buying things on eBay, I think I've only bought one thing of what I have in my collection on eBay relating to these stamps, and from a postal history perspective. So not a lot of opportunities there. And so it just makes it that much more challenging. So what I'm going to show you now are the various types of usages that I have been able to observe and collect. I'm sure there's probably some that I don't even know about that maybe somebody can bring about. And here's something also very important. So when I have written many articles in the past, I haven't done it in the last few years, mainly because I had some serious health issues I had to take care of. And I also wanted to spend some time with my son. But I'm going to start writing again, and I hopefully will bring some more articles on board, and I'll do one relating to this presentation as well. But you don't have too many opportunities when you have this kind of material. It's very difficult to make presentations. And I was lucky that I was able to bring up, several things on board. So let me start this process. So here you go. First issue, philatelic covers. I would say that on a given day, you'll probably find slightly more philatelic covers than commercial covers, but very small. It's almost a 50-50 split when you see them. This is, the full set of the first issue shown on two different covers. Interesting, attractive, that stamps. I like the stamps myself. I think they're interesting. Um, and then finding, obviously, whether it be philatelic or commercial, it's nice to find, values on cover. I can tell you that one challenge I didn't even cover in this is to try to find each value used to cover a specific rate or using combinations of rates. And I don't think I can say that I have every single value used in a commercial way, but I do have several that are. Okay, so that was the introduction there. So here's a perfect example. Here are two covers that are basically commercial rate usages. Now, here's two things you have to understand. Even mail is classified as philatelic a lot of times because the frankings are over the normal rates. However, there are existing correspondences where you can say, oh, it's a philatelic cover because it went to a person who uh, was a collector. Now, I find that definition a little too broad when it comes to labeling something philatelic, and I'll give you a perfect example of this. So everybody, I'm sure most people that have postal history in their collection at one time or another have owned what's known as a Booker cover. So Viola Booker was a person who had what they call the Bermuda Smoke Shop. Sorry, I moved that. Bermuda Smoke Shop in Bermuda. She arrived there in the mid 1920s. Unfortunately, passed away in the 50s by something that I found out by accident. She was actually hit by a bus in Bermuda and subsequently passed away as a result of those injuries. But the reason why I mentioned her name is there are a ton of Booker covers, but a lot of them are franked at proper rates. Now, there are several that are philatelic, no question about it. The rates are, higher than normal. But what she did was she expanded. She had two aspects of her writing, and I'm including her because I think it's important to mention collecting philatelic covers. She basically wanted to establish a network of people that she could then write to and exchange stamps or get stamps. But she also wanted pen pals. She liked having people that she could write to in other countries and vice versa, have them write back to her. So she did this for a very long time, established a big network. And there are a lot of key plate covers that are non-philatelic in the sense that the rates were proper going to back and forth. So again, keep in mind that some things may look philatelic, but maybe not necessarily, especially when they're paying proper rates. So in these two cases, it looks like, for the most part, they are non-philatelic because the rates were proper. Canada was 1 penny, US was 2.5. So they used the one value to make up these rates. And I thought that was pretty interesting that they just probably went to the post office, had some of these stamps extra or used them and said, look, they're colorful, let me use them. And in a way, indirectly celebrating the tercentenary during that time. They're both within proper period use, which is also another giveaway, usually if it's philatelic or not. So here's another example. You'll find typically when you look at postcards, it's not that they're overly rare, but you don't find them too often. If you looked at 100 picture postcards, you might find one or two frankings like this. So occasionally, you'll find the 1 penny and half-penny tercentenary also on postcards. I have one. I didn't illustrate it here. And then you'll have where they mix together the various stamps to make up the proper rate. This registered cover is the proper rate at 4.5 pence. At this particular time, it was 2 penny for registration and 2.5 pence for the actual rate of a single letter to the US. Now, a lot of people who collect Bermuda love hotel advertising covers. So you can find them, but again, not as many as you would think. I think I have 3 or 4 in my collection. And so a challenge to find them in this particular period. I actually have seen more in the Queen Victoria period and in the early Caravel period than I have during the Tercentenary period. So not common at all. Let me see over here. I need to move this. So here's an example of a local use of a 1 penny paying the local postcard rate to Pembroke. Now, I have to tell you, this is the only one I personally have ever seen. I'm sure there's others out there, but not often because number one, these stamps were not regularly used on picture postcards for the prior statement that I made. And so to find one used locally even is more challenging than not. The other thing, the one below is you will find some local usages. I've seen more of those than I definitely have of the postcard. And so the challenge there is to try to find, some unusual towns, origins. This particular one's going to Paget. And I know it has a back stamp for, I think it's Paget East is the one that they have. So again, challenging area just to find a local postcard and or a local mail with these stamps properly used. Now, here's another thing. So in all my collecting of Bermuda in the past, I used to do what I would call an accumulation stage. If I got the bug to research something, then I would start picking up items regularly, buying lots when they were available, things of that type, so that at some point during that accumulation stage, you could start sorting things out and notice what kinds of trends are out there, what kinds of availability there is for certain things. And certain things will stick out and say, oh my God, look at this. So a perfect example is this postal stationery card. So I picked this up recently, probably about less than a year ago in a UK auction. And it wasn't a name sale for Bermuda. It was a different auction. And it had a few usages. But this on a postal stationery card, I've never seen another one. I'm sure they exist, but I personally have never seen one other than this one. And you would say, wow, let me look at it and think. So the reason why I do this is because I want people to, number one, learn from things that I can show them, but also for them to go and get that bug and start looking through their collection and say, oh, wow, look, I just found this other usage of this. And then hopefully report it back either through the Bermuda Post or through one of these future stamp chats. I think that's one of the reasons why I think having these group meetings is important, because then you have not only a collective experience, but then you have follow-up and you can continue documenting and writing up these discoveries. I love the fact that Nigel and I are always talking about Bermuda Boer War. I used to collect it very extensively. And the Bermuda Boer War, even at this day and age, we still make discoveries of things that prior you had no idea that they even existed. And so to me, it's amazing that even after 100 years, you can still make new discoveries. The next one is a postal stationery registered envelope, the George V envelope. And the interesting thing is you will find once in a while, I mean, they're not super rare, but they're not that uncommon. You'll find a usage just like this. Now, what I noticed though, in going through everything that I have, I've seen a couple at going to the US at the 2.5 penny rate, but that's all I've seen. And I don't own one. I don't have a 2.5 penny usage on a registered envelope going to the US. So again, difficult to find some of these things. Now here's a very, very interesting item. That same auction that I told you about in the UK, that was not a named sale, also had this in there in a separate lot. This is a handmade wrapper with a tercentenary stamp. It's the only one I've ever seen, but it also begs the question. I've never seen one used on a Bermuda postal stationery wrapper at all. And just so you guys know, one of the things about me as a person and as a collector is that I'm fairly well known for having a semi-photographic memory. So I'm looking at, and I'll give you the quick story here. So several years ago, Phoebe McGillivray of Victoria Stamps called me and said, Bill, I'm writing a section about St. Helena, and I know that Stanley Gibbons had an auction a few years ago. And so I said, yeah, if you go to your pile, because she used to have when she had her office in town in New Jersey, she had her office with a lot of stacks of magazines and books and things. And I said, yeah, if you go to the Stanley Gibbon pile and you look at the front cover and you see this German colony stamp, a particular one that I mentioned to her, I said, if you go in there and you go back towards the end, you're going to find the section you're looking for. And so she called me 5 minutes later and says, how do you do that, Bill? And so it's one of those things where I have always been observant and I always have this going for now, even though I've aged obviously since then quite a bit. I still have a fairly good memory, especially visually. So if I've seen a cover or a stamp, I will know it. And I'll give you one last little side note, again, going back to our group members. So Tom McMahon, who was very prominent in our group for many years, he and I were very good friends. And I used to go to visit him in Jupiter, Florida. And I would remind him where he had bought things that he didn't remember where he got them from. So just talk stuff like that, okay? So anyway, keep your eyes open for this, and also particularly for if you find or if anybody knows that they have seen or have a usage of this stamp on a postal stationery wrapper, please let me know about it, and the members, because it's got to be rare. I've never seen one. Now this is an interesting point here. So there was a time period in 1921, and I'm sure some of you that collect postal history have seen this. You may own some, where the machine cancel was issued in purple. And so if you look at Ludington's book, he has it listed as the start as February the 5th, 1921. And then he's got like a question mark that it ended around February 25th. So we're looking at about a 3-week period here of usage. So finding these usages during that time period, obviously it fits the tercentenary issue dates. And so you can find them. So you'll find these around. So postcard is challenging. You don't find too many postcards with it. I think I've seen 3 with the purple cancel. And then on cover, you'll see them periodically. Now, this particular cover is interesting because the date is February the 4th, which predates Ludington by 1 day. And so, you know, it could potentially be a new earliest known date. So that's why I have that. Now, this pair is a very interesting one because they're both extending the date from the 25th to the 26th of February. Both of them are dated that date. But what makes this really interesting is, first of all, they're double rate covers, so they're legitimate double rate frankings to regular people. But more importantly, one's in black and one is in purple, and they both have the same time date stamp on the cancel, which is 8 a.m. So I ask in here, and I'm sure that we'll make this available to everybody to review. So the question then becomes, were there more than one machine canceling devices in the post office at Hamilton? Because you couldn't do both black and purple at the same time. Or my thinking is that maybe there was only one machine. They started out the first part of the day at 8 a.m. when the post office opened, canceling using the old purple cancel. And then at some point, for whatever reason, I don't know, and maybe Horst could give us an idea of why this may have happened. they may have said, look, we're going to stop using the purple cancel today. Let's switch the machine. And so halfway between the 8 a.m. hour and 9 a.m. hour, they came up with this change and made it black. Now, if we can find covers that change the purple like at 9 or 10 a.m. of that date, then that would dispel what I just said. But if we can only find black at after 8 o'clock, then that would more or less substantiate what I said. And this brings us to an interesting thing, going back to what I said about accumulation and looking at various covers. Once you have certain things you can compare, then you can start using your scientific brain and start figuring out, what's the potentials here for these types of usages. And so that's one of the reasons why I think these types of covers are very interesting in that they open up those different possibilities for you to look into. So let me go on. So postage due, obviously, people sometimes don't frank their covers properly. They don't know the rates. There's mistakes, whatever the case may be. Sometimes some postage due covers are created philatelically, not always. And here's an example of a good, solid postage due usage. The person, maybe they only had a couple of stamps left over. They didn't want to go to the post office and said, let's just send it this way. So again, just illustrating that there are chances for you to find postage due usages. I particularly like it when they have the postage due stamps in combination with the due mark. And so there's some out there, but I have to tell you, I haven't seen a whole lot of them when it comes to the tercentenary issues. I've seen a handful on postcard. I think I have one out there, more so than on cover, but covers are not very easily found with tercentenary stamps and postage due. Now, some collectors, I know Jeff Dow is one of them, love collecting the various registration labels from the smaller towns. I will tell you that almost all the ones I've seen from the smaller towns tend to be philatelic in nature over franked covers. This one, the collector was the recipient, and but they are nice to look at. Secondly, in some situations, some of these labels were introduced right around that time, and so a lot of these covers will have the earliest known dates of usage of these labels. So that adds to it, even though it could potentially be considered a philatelic usage. Now here's another area. So maritime mail and packing. So when I started the presentation, I mentioned that the tourist business was picking up, but at this particular juncture in time, it wasn't a major thing yet. It wasn't like in the later 20s when you had all these different shipping companies going back to Bermuda and taking a lot. It took a few years to get back to that point. People were hit hard during the war economically. The people didn't want to travel. They wanted to stay home. It was a challenge to get them back. Well, guess what? There are some usages, but trying to find and Nigel might be able to comment on this because he collects a lot of maritime mail these days. How many usages you will find that are legitimate in-period usages of tercentenary stamps in combination with packable or maritime shipping? Not many in period. The cover I have at top I show because even though it was used in 1933, which is well beyond the norm, it's a very interesting cover. There's very few covers with Bermuda franking where there's two different ships on the same cover. And what would happen is if you had a ship that was going southbound and then another one going northbound, sometimes it was more efficient to switch the mail bags at port, and the ship that was going north to New York and then having the mail distributed to the US mainly and other points, it would make sense to do that. And so the way they documented that a lot of times was by actually using the ship marks from both ships. You don't find covers like that very often. I've seen very few relating to Bermuda. I've seen some of the earlier marks from around this time period as the first ones. But I wanted to show it because I thought it was an interesting usage to go for. The second cover, I only show the back of it. It's a standard 1 penny rate to the UK. This is the Elders and Fifes line, which is very interesting. I started researching it, and I didn't realize that United Fruit Company, which was very prominent in the Caribbean, actually bought them out in 1910. So they were running it, and they did a combination of things. Their main function when they first started was to get bananas to the UK. And so they would go to all these countries. That's why this one's from British Honduras, the top cover. And eventually they said, you know what? We can have tourists and also in the cargo hold have the bananas. And so that's how they expanded and did that and added many ships to their fleet over time. Now, as I point out here, this is my favorite cover. I saw this cover. It was in as a lot in Spink a few years ago, not too many, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I fell in love with this cover. First of all, early telegram covers are not common. I've seen, and I have, I think, a Caravelle one, and I've seen some used in the early 20s. I've never seen anything earlier than that, other than the few known letter sheets of telegrams that were censored in World War I. Those are the earliest ones I've seen. But this is the only tercentenary cover I have seen with that relates to a telegram out of Bermuda, and certainly even rarer, registered. Most telegram covers are not registered. So to find it registered, it's in such nice condition. Usually, sometimes when you're opening telegrams, people weren't concerned; they were just wanted to get to the mail. And so to find it this nice and going to crawl, I mean, the whole aspect of this cover, it really did it for me. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't cheap, but I wanted it, so I went after it, and thankfully my wife didn't complain, and I got the cover. Now this is an interesting cover. This came out of also a collector lot out of the UK. And what made you say, well, okay, it's a standard cover. So the first thing is, during the course of studying postal history, you will find that there are covers that are unsealed. A lot of times those unsealed covers usually included some kind of a flyer or notice or something that was sent commercially. And it's sort of like when you go to the post office today and you have pre-sorted mail and you get a favorable rate. Well, back then, if you didn't seal it and they could easily just look at it, for whatever reason, they lowered the rate. So sometimes you will find covers like this particular one that'll have the 1 penny on it, and it's an unsealed letter rate. And so going to the US, even though the normal rate was 2.5 pence, they would accept it. However, this particular cover, that's not the case. This cover is sealed, probably should have been charged postage due and was not. But maybe the reason was that this mail was disinfected. Those slits that you see at either side and this was noted on the write-up page of the collection that I got, this was disinfected. And so maybe as a result of that, because people were kind of averse to dealing with mail that could have potentially had some kind of harm for them, they didn't go and check it out, and then they just distributed it. So that's probably it. But it's the only one I've seen relating to Bermuda, any period, but for specifically tercentenary period, that's disinfected. Now, here's again one of my favorite covers of this issue. So the first tercentenary stamps that were issued were the 1 penny and the 2.5 penny on November 11th, 1920. Well, the war tax had to be paid on covers officially until December 31st, 1920. So you have a 52-day period where you can find an in-period usage correctly paying the war tax rate in combination with a tercentenary stamp. I've seen 6 covers in the last 30 years. I have 3 of the 6, and one is a double rate cover. I didn't show that one because this was particularly nice and it had the date on it. Good luck finding them. It's a real challenge, okay? And when most of the time when people recognize it, they do charge for it because they recognize the rarity of it. A lot of people collect war tax stamps along the colonies collectively, not just as an individual colony, but also as I do. I collect war tax, specific things in the war tax area. For me, I try to collect commercial usages to unusual origin destinations. And I'll let the cat out of the bag. Try finding a Bermuda war tax stamp properly used on a picture postcard. Another really good challenge for you. I've seen two, and I have one. Um, and that's after many years. So now let's look at this one. So the Zeppelins. So the Zeppelins occurred in February and April of 1925, after the period of time where you could have used within period a tercentenary stamp. So in both of these cases, they added a farthing stamp. It wasn't part of the rate, didn't need to be part of it. They did it just because they wanted to make it look more attractive. So they're in that way, you can consider them philatelic covers. However, I think I've seen 4 usages with these stamps on Zeppelin covers. This particular, I was preparing this and I didn't even notice at the time that I got lucky in that I have each of the 2 markings in covers that have the tercentenary stamp. So I have the double line and the triple line used on these things. Now, the one legitimate use that I've seen used to be mine. It's now in someone else's collection. I won't mention who. They can mention it if they want to. Where it's a combination frank cover. I was very big collector of those type combination, meaning US and Bermuda stamps on the same cover, paying for special delivery, airmail, that type of stuff. And there is a cover that has tercentenary stamps. Now, I will tell you, it was over franked. However, it was a somewhat legitimate use because going over, I believe it was either registered or special delivery franking, which was legitimate. And I think the person, when they were sending the cover back from Bermuda, was trying to have it treated in the same fashion when it went back to the US. And so maybe it wasn't over frank. Maybe they used the Bermuda stamps as payment for the special delivery within the US. I don't recall exactly. So, but it's a great cover and it has it. The Bermuda stamps are on the back of the cover. So that's the only downside of it. But other than those 3 and one other one, I have never seen another tercentenary usage in combination with the Zeppelin flights. Now, there's some other collectors that are also very interested in departmental envelopes, OHMS envelopes, as well as hand stamps. This is very interesting material. This first one that I'm showing, Engineer in Charge Channel Works. Never seen another one in any period, let alone with a tercentenary stamp. And that's a proper one going to the US. Looks commercial in every way. The second one is the franking is a 1 penny to the UK. It says OHMS on the top, just as a generic envelope. But this particular hand stamp I've never seen before. Non-Dieted Hospital, Waterford, in Bermuda. A great item, a challenge to, try to find another one. That's all I would say about that. I got very lucky when I found this item. The next slide also shows another one. It's a little folded there at the end, but again, Chief of Police, going to Switzerland, a different franking, also tercentenary. You don't find many OHMS usages. Usually when you do, it's the post office. Those are the ones you're going to find more often. I'd say 98% of the time. So to find these oddball ones is definitely a challenge when you're collecting tercentenary stamps. Here's another interesting example. So they had this as a single lot in a Spink auction. And the rarity was supposedly focused around this K period item. I maybe Horst or Nigel could share some light on this particular cover. I've never seen another Bermuda cover with that K period. Recently, I did see a cover from a different colony that had an OHMS with this K. I have no idea what that departmental reference would be. What makes this cover particularly interesting also is the fact that it doesn't look it here, but in person, it's more viable, is that the cancel is bluish black and it's listed in Ludington during that period. So to find the Ireland Island bluish black cancel is not common at all. And so to find this combination of the scarcity of the cancel along with the scarcity of the envelope is an interesting thing. Now, another thing that people try to collect in postal history are unusual destination mails. Here's some examples of that. So the first cover is a registered usage on postal stationery, which again, you don't find too often. It also has a manuscript St. George's uh, registration label, which is not common. Haven't checked the date period for this particular one. I think it's close to the earliest known date, but not the earliest known date. But what's interesting is where it's going to. It's going to a person in the military in the Army of the Black Sea in Constantinople. So that is quite a heck of a destination for Bermuda, especially around this time, because you just don't find the mail going there too often. Now, here's an interesting item and something that that you always ask yourself the question if you ever sell some of your material, should I really sell this or not? So I sold this. I was trying to sell this postcard until I realized, you know what? If I'm trying to form a collection of tercentenaries, going a postcard going to India, properly rated, maybe that's something I should keep. So I did. A very nice item. Never seen another one going to India, either cover or picture postcard. Another one that comes up, this particular cover um, is to British Guiana. Now, high franking. You could possibly make a rate out of it, like a triple, quadruple rate. Honestly, I don't think it is because it's that particular person that it's going to. It was a collector, a known collector. So more than likely a philatelic cover, but still nice usage, good high values, which are not always easy to find on cover, especially a registered cover, and going to an unusual destination. So it is a difficult and nice usage to have. So we're getting down almost to the end of the presentation. So I wanted to show this item. So Frank P. Brown is one of those people that was well established as a collector in the United States. There's a lot of Brown covers during this time period for many colonies, but Bermuda is very strong. And the reason why I wanted to show this cover is even though it's philatelic in the true sense, um, I've never seen another doc usage with a tercentenary stamp. So again, when I'm looking at forming any type of collection, any oddball, anything like that, I usually try to get because it just adds to the story. All right. And it is philatelic, but hey, I like it. I think it's an interesting cover. And I like the color combination that they have. Blue envelope, red and yellow, just interesting. Now the last one. So I bought this item not too long ago. And I bought it because, oh, I like the franking. I said a half penny and a 2.5 penny on a postcard. Great item, very colorful. But then it hit me like it does sometimes when you look at a cover a second time. This is actually a supplementary double rate usage proper for these stamps. And what do I mean by that? So the ship's in the port. You want to pay extra money so that it gets on the ship while it's in port. So it was double the regular rate. The rate was 1.5 pence. So they paid the rate using these two stamps. There was no Docs Hamilton cancel back then. Docs Hamilton cancel didn't come in until like 1933, I believe, 33, 34. And so you have these usages. When I saw this, it proved the several points to me. One, the whole concept of discovery when you're collecting. I've never seen one at all. It was amazing to me when I found it because I have seen other covers during this time period that are Caravelle, and this is something that you guys should keep your eyes open for when you're looking through postcard dealer stocks or at shows. When you see postcards that have double the rate on them, unless they're a registered postcard, which again is also a rare item to find, more than likely it is a proper double rate paying the supplementary rate. They are not common at all. And so finding them, I have, probably about 8 to 10 of them because I looked for them over the years. And I love that I have like different combinations. So they'll have like a 2.5 penny and a half penny usage, 3 1 pennies, all that kind of stuff. And so keep your eyes open for it. But for the tercentenary, this is the only one I've ever seen where it's fully. Now you may find one that maybe has a caravel and a tercentenary. That would also be equally rare to find. But I wanted to close with this because, again, emphasizing the idea of the interest in trying to find new discoveries and the challenge of collecting these issues. So that's pretty much my presentation for today. I just wanted to illustrate all these different available items that you can look for. I'm sure they overlap with a lot of your collecting interests, and I think it's a challenging issue.
Thank you, Bill. That was fantastic. Any comments, questions, discussion?
Yeah. Hi, Bill. Dave Robinson here.
Hey, Dave.
As you were describing this, I was going through my stuff here to see what I had and what I didn't. So thank you very much. But if I have an image I want to send to you just for comparison, what's a good email to send it to you?
So I have two active emails. I'll give you guys both of them. If one fails, you can always use the other one. But the easiest one is my initials, which is B as in boy, C as in Charles, and G. So BCG 1126, which is my birthday, at hotmail.com.
Hotmail. Okay.
Yep. And then I have another one, which is B and my last name. So B Gompel, Gompel, at CFL, C Frank Larry. So CFL dot RR.com.
And you use one more than the other?
I look at both every day.
Okay.
I started off with Hotmail, and then eventually, when I moved into my home many years ago, we had a cable provider, and I started using there. So I have both.
Yeah, the Roadrunner is one. It's not seen often.
Yeah, but you know what? In Florida, they're very strong here. So,
Mm,
like my entire neighborhood and several neighborhoods in this area in Orlando have Roadrunner.
okay. Well, I'll send you some images and I'll
That'll be great. And listen,
pick
guys,
your brain.
if anybody wants to write to me on this topic or any topic relating to Bermuda, especially or even other areas, I collect quite a bit and I dabble quite a bit and I research quite a bit. Um, I just hadn't been writing much lately because I got a little down when I was ill. But I'm back, let's call it that way, and doing better. So I hope to start that up again. But I'm always willing to help anybody with any questions. Anybody wants to show me something, ask me questions about it. I'm free for that at any time. I love stamps. I've collected nonstop for the last 52 years. I started when I was 10. And I did not have a break like some people. Oh, I went off to college. And I've collected nonstop since I started at 10. So, and it's funny when we have this meeting, I'm thinking about, and that's why I kind of brought in Phoebe and I brought in Tom. Uh, we've lost just about every founding member of this group. There's two left, and I believe it's Tom Banzak. I think he was one of them, and then Phoebe. I was very close friends with all of them. I was the kid. I joined these groups. I joined the original Bermuda High when I was so young that I basically I was like, I don't know, 22, 23 and a half. And so I embellished and said I was 24 because I was embarrassed that I was so young at the time. I'm going to be 63 this coming November. So it's a shame that I'm hopefully some of you met some of these people, but it's a shame that they're gone. The camaraderie, the wealth of knowledge was just outstanding. And inspired me to really be very involved with the society. I've held several different positions for many long periods of time. It'll take a while for someone to outdo me as the auction manager. I did it for many, many years. I did it with Tom as an assistant and also individually. I was president for a while, and I only left the presidency because of my illness. I didn't say that at the time, but that was the reason because I could have remained forever if I had wanted to. I would have loved to. But I also feel that sometimes we need new blood in the society. We need to be viable and vibrant. And the only way you can do that is by bringing people. I see Michael with his exuberance and energy. Michael, I still have a lot of that, but I was even worse than you when I was starting out in my 20s. Oh my God, I was a holy terror. I just couldn't stop. And I really enjoyed being with everybody. And it's kind of a good circle back to be to this point now. And I really enjoy stamps and especially all the friends that I've made over time through stamps.
Well, Bill, I thank you for that, and your presentation was fantastic. And I think for me, being a newbie, I always feel like every time I go to these, I feel more and more of a newbie. But you know, I do feel like there's a neat sort of a catalyst, an ignition of things when you of a fire and excitement about things when you don't know about things. Sometimes we always say, I don't know what question to ask, and you present so many different things here. And I think every time, again, you present things that new people like me can now have more experience with it and then look for it, and it adds another component to it. So I appreciate that. And by the way, big shoes. And I think coming into this group, every time I'm more and more amazed. Even with these Zooms, I just get more and more amazed the more I talk and meet every one of you, and I'm excited about that. But I'm the elementary kid, and I'm I'm learning. I've got my readers out. Bill, I actually had a question for you.
Sure.
So the postage due cover that you had, so you had, um, I think it was paid with U.S. stamps.
It was.
Were they pre-cancels?
They were. I'm going to go back to it so we can take a quick look at it. Let me see if I can find it here. Maybe I passed it. Let me go back up to the top here. There it is. So yes, there's pre-cancels, and here's an interesting thing. You know that most of a lot of the mail from Bermuda, a lot of times in the U.S. would go sometimes to the Midwest, but a lot of times mainly to the Northeast or the East Coast. This one particularly went to Los Angeles, California, and the pre-cancels are Los Angeles.
Yeah. Huh.
So an interesting cover from that perspective as well.
That's a cool cover.
Yeah, it's it's interesting and again, it's funny because when you see these types of things, now you go to a show like, oh, listen, we're all going to have a lot of fun at Boston because let me tell you, when I was younger, we would go to a show. I remember we went to the big international in Canada in Toronto in 1986 or 87, and that was my first international show. Oh my God, there was like 30 Bermuda collectors there, okay? And we were all going everywhere, trying to outdo everybody, trying to get here, trying to get there. It was just this buzz in the room. And I'm sure we're going to be somewhat similar when we do it again in Boston. But it'll be fun, and it'll be fun to get together and have dinner together and share stories and things like that.
Fantastic.
Great.
Any other questions for Bill while we have him? Good. All right, Bill, I'm gonna take you off the hook. Again, I will be editing these, and my idea is a social for us to come together, to inspire each other, to share information, to learn information. But I also like being able to record these as YouTubes. I think it's a valuable resource, and so they're set up so when you Google Bermuda stamps or Tercentenary, they'll come up, and I'm excited about a person just kind of wandering through the YouTube and discovering that and getting that bug as well. So appreciate that, and I will keep these up so that they'll be a resource for a long time.
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
All right, Horst. What you
Hey,
got?
Horst.
Hi. 3 or 4 things. You in your beginning, you mentioned Mrs. Booker,
Yes.
and you mentioned the smoke shop.
Yep.
Just a correction, she had the art shop.
Okay, that's right. Her husband was the one who
Gorgeous.
had the smoke shop.
The smoke shop was Donald Gibbons,
Yeah.
also a dealer. Okay, just a minor thing. But a couple of things. You mentioned the purple cancellation that Morris Larnington listed on the stamps. I actually have Morris's collection of those, and I've got to check back, and we'll get back to you about that, the dates that you're questioning, because there's like several pages of them that he collected. But more importantly, you showed a cover which had the two slits on the sides,
Yes,
and you mentioned that they may have been infected,
disinfected, yes.
disinfected. Those slits, I have several of them going back to Queen Victoria. They were just slits so the post office could confirm that it was printed matter and not another handwritten letter. So you could pay the printed matter rate by slitting the envelope on both sides so that the post office could theoretically look inside and make sure it's printed matter.
This is exactly the reason why we have these types of gatherings. So I went, of course, by what was written on the album page.
Yeah.
And I have seen some covers similarly cut that were actually for disinfection purposes, although slightly different in some cases.
But in
But
your
that's
case,
great idea. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me that they wanted a way to check. And then that
Yeah.
means that that cover was sent at the legitimate rate for printed
Yes.
matter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was done
That's
for
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that clarity and that observation. See, we all learn.
Okay. My last point is,
Yes.
you didn't mention why there were two different sets of tercentenary stamps.
I know that, but you go ahead and say it. I want you to say it.
Well, it was the governor of Bermuda who suggested, this was General Wilcox, who suggested to the Legislative Council, there was no parliament at that point, that, well, there was a parliament, but they called it Legislative Council, that they should produce a commemorative issue in 2020 or in 1920. And the Legislative Council agreed, and the governor took it upon himself to order the stamps and had them designed in England. And then the stamps arrived, 9 stamps, and the Legislative Council didn't like them. They said, you didn't have the authority to have them printed, you didn't run it by us, and we're going to do our own set. And they had a Bermudian architect design the second set. So kind of interesting.
Very interesting.
So that's why we have 18 stamps for the first commemorative stamp of Bermuda.
And they turned around the second set pretty quickly.
Yeah. It was a local architect who designed them. They wanted certain elements in addition to what the governor had.
Right.
So they didn't really get along too well, the governor and the
You know what? And I actually like both of them. I think they're good in their own way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's all from me.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Horace.
All right, I think that concludes our Bermuda stamp chat. Thank you so much for everybody. Fantastic information and discussion as always. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in October, and I will work hard to continue these stamp chats. And if you have ideas of things that you're looking for, I guess my idea is to have the expert and then have the new things, expert new things. So we sort of cover all the bases there, but this one was fantastic. So I'm enjoying all of them. So I appreciate that, and thank you so much. And have a good one. Hopefully Delaware will get some rain tonight. Oh my, I got to go out and water some more.
I'm getting a ton of it right now as we speak. It was thundering while I was
Send
talking.
it up. Send it up to Delaware. Oh my gosh, we need it. So you all do well. Have a great fall, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in October. Thank you so much. Stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Bye,
your
everyone.
participation. Thank you, Horace.
Very much, Bill. I loved it. I love your presentation.
Thank you.
And thanks,
care.
Michael, for being a great host. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yes, Mike.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate your efforts.
Rock on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I appreciated it too.
Take care.